Hello students, this is Dr. Henry and I'm your instructor for BUS 215 Business Communication. This week I'm going to provide an overview of Chapter 3, which discusses team communication as well as how to handle difficult conversations. The chapter starts out by giving us some principles to follow when we want to make sure that we are communicating effectively, because you could be communicating, but it may not be effective. Effective speaks to whether the communication accomplishes what it is designed and set out to do. So, some of the things listed here for team communication, working in groups with other people to be effective, you have to focus on performance. So, what is the purpose of the group? Is the group been put together to create a report, or what is it going to do? So, the communication should center around the goal or the thing that the group has been put together to accomplish. Otherwise, it's wasting its time. And in a second, we'll look at the four stages of making sure it's a high performing group. Each group has its own values, norms, goals, if you will, how it prefers to operate and what it is seeking to do. It is best that they meet often. Now, not every day. And so this number 4 could be a little confusing because you don't want to meet every day, twice a day, but you want to meet periodically during the project before it ends so that you can have critical checkpoints covered. It talks about focusing on the psychological safety to ensure that all voices are heard. You don't want any member of the team to feel like they're being devalued. Also, recognize and actively avoid groupthink. You don't want to become where the group pretty much has a negative mindset. It lends itself to peer pressure, not letting individuals be individuals in the group who may have creative ideas. Groupthink kind of hinders that, and we'll look at a little of those aspects in a second. You want to embrace diversity. You want to have different people of different backgrounds who have different perspectives, who have different talents and skills on your team. You want the group to actually solve problems and generate solutions, and then always give each member feedback on their performance. All right, so when you're developing a high performing group, all groups go through these stages. And if you've ever been on a group before, whether you knew these stages or not, your group did all 4 of these: forming, storming, norming, and performing. It used to be a joining, that last one, but forming is when you gain acceptance. Okay, the group members just meet each other for the first time, perhaps. They learn what is the background of each member. They gain acceptance and then they begin to focus on the goal and avoid conflict. Norming is next, where the team gets in a rhythm, if you will, about how they're going to plan work, how they're going to dish out roles, and who's going to be accountable for what. And then storming is where the group opens up and everyone is hopefully comfortable in presenting their ideas, but the group eventually has to settle on, one idea. For example, you can't use everybody's thoughts and ideas. So the group has to decide what is the best idea or best course of action, the best strategy. And so, it might be a little push and pull during this time. That's why it's called storming. But at the end, the group begins to agree and settle on a path forward. And then last, performing is where the team is operating efficiently and is getting its goals accomplished. Each team has a culture. These are, of course, the roles, responsibilities, and goals of the team that the team has collectively decided to do. And this says this is normally done in the norming stage. Team charter, it may or may not be a written thing, but it should definitely be understood by all the members. But this includes the purpose or mission of the group, the goals. Each team member has an outlined definite role. Someone's going to be the team lead, and this could change throughout, if it's a long-term group where you have multiple projects. On each project, someone may take on the leader role, for example. But at the end of the day, you should have someone that makes the decision in the group based on the project. And then there should be a way to resolve conflicts and give feedback. All right, groupthink is a negative aspect. And so when the group begins to collectively rationalize things or think it has a moral high ground, or it begins to censor itself, if, for example, you're in a group and you want to present ideas, but you don't because you don't think it'll be accepted by the others, that's when groupthink starts to limit the capacity or what the group can do. Other things I talked about: peer pressure, the illusion of invulnerability, like it can never be vulnerable. It definitely can. So you want to think of threats to the project. For example, you don't want to think that you are beyond that because there could be outside factors that could um, slow the group down or prevent it from accomplishing its goal. You don't want to, in groupthink, you may become complacent where you just do the standard quo. Oh, I'm the one that always does the writing or something, and you never change. So when you become complacent, you don't move forward. You want to avoid all of these things that could happen during groupthink. Now, things that you want to embrace in your group, you're going to have hopefully diversity, and there are two different types the book talks about. You have inherent diversity, diversity that is just there and you don't have any control over it. So hopefully you're going to have people of different ages, different genders, different ethnicities on your group already. And then there is the acquired diversity, where through experience or your background or the jobs that you've had, you acquire these things. And it may be as the group continues to stay together, you'll have past experiences as a group that help the group overall. So you could acquire other forms of diversity that will help you in creating a good group dynamic. Let's see. All right, other things that a group may encounter. In your group, you should have times where you pull away and work independently and times where you come back collectively as a group. So, divergence talks about when you work independently. Here, sometimes people need time to think and create ideas. And then when they come back and bring those to the group, it's called convergence, where now the group can look at all the ideas and solutions and then narrow them down to the best ones. It talks about quick ways to develop trust. I think the entire chapter 1 talks about ways to develop trust. So I'm going to kind of move past that part. Managing meetings is another important aspect to make teams effective. You want to make sure that you have the purpose of the meeting in mind and you're not wasting people's time. You only want to invite the people who should really be in attendance, and the times and the time of day and the time of the week or day of the week that you schedule are also important in making sure your meeting is effective. You want to have an agenda that outlines what are we going to talk about, and you want to stick to that agenda, for example. And you should know if you need outside assistance or outside expertise, you should know when is the appropriate time to invite them in. They shouldn't necessarily be on every single meeting. So these are just some things to make sure your meetings are effective. The PowerPoint talks about the best times of day, and it says that's between 10 and noon, if you will. And that is a good time. Most people have gotten there, they've had their coffee, so they're awake, and then they haven't, been sluggish after lunch. So it says between 10 a.m. and noon is the best time, according to the workers that they surveyed. The types of meetings, you want to make sure they're coordinated because you may have to do sub meetings depending on what kind of project, how large it is. Sometimes you have to have problem solving meetings where if something unexpected came up during the project and now everybody needs to look at it and talk about it, you might hold a special meeting out of your normal schedule just for that. You should have an agenda. It should talk about everything that needs to be talked about. I'm going to kind of move past some of these. Each meeting should have a facilitator, and you want to avoid the trap of if someone is being difficult for no reason, the person running the meeting has to be able to get the meeting back on track. And so in a second, we'll look at, what do you do with difficult conversations? Sometimes you have to have follow-up meetings for clarity. I wanted to talk here about virtual meetings because we are currently in the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you're watching this video after that has passed, you will understand that it occurred and many more virtual meetings occurred as a result of it. And so there will be times when the group cannot physically meet together, whether it's a pandemic or, they're painting the office and you don't want to smell the paint fumes. There could be multiple reasons why you have to work virtually, but you want to make them also as effective as possible. So you want to make sure you pick the best technology for your meeting and make sure all your team members have access to it and know how to use it. So you need to build trust. If you can meet in person, and to do this virtually, turn on your camera. Sometimes it helps to see the other members during the meeting. Get to know each other as best you can. I talked about the technologies to choose, and you definitely always want to have a team lead to keep the meetings on track. There are some examples you can read through in the PowerPoint, but here are some tips for running an effective virtual meeting. It talks about start with a little social chat. So before the meeting starts, you might say, hey, how's the weather where you are? Or, I see you have a dog. What's his name? Etc. Before the meeting actually starts. You could ask contentious questions, which would be those that would likely spur up some heated debate. But if it's related to the project, you may need to ask those questions. So what do you think about the new, whatever that's happened during your project, something like that. And you want to get everyone involved. So you want to hear from everybody as best you can, depending on the time, of course. You want someone to take minutes, and it says avoid multitasking, but what you want to do is, what it should say is stay focused during the virtual meeting, because we all multitask. You may be taking notes, but if you're in a virtual meeting, you don't want to be on another call during that virtual meeting. But if you are looking up something or during the virtual meeting that's related, then in those instances, you may need to multitask, but make sure your focus is on the meeting. It talks about group writing. Sometimes a group will have to do a report together, and each person might have a separate part. You want to have a strategy to make sure it's effective. So start right away. Don't delay, because some people need more time to write. Plan out what's going to be in. I'm just using a report as an example, if that's what it is. Each person should have a section, should have a role that they're focusing on. Everyone should stay flexible, because changes often need to be made with rewrites and edits and first drafts. And then at the very end, you want one person to kind of make sure that it flows the way it needs to the reader, and it doesn't sound like 10 different people wrote it, for example. All right, the last thing I wanted to talk about is managing difficult conversations. There are often times when group members may disagree or have a conflict about ideas or how the group should move forward, but you have to find a positive way to bring the group back to effective production, because if people stop talking or stop communicating, that's not going to solve the problem. So it talks about embracing those difficult conversations, because we all know sometimes they have to happen and you cannot avoid them. But the book goes into more detail, saying that you need to make sure that you are respectful and talk about the issue, not the person. So always assume the best in others, and your stance, whether they can see you or not virtually, you need to have an open attitude, if you will, so that the person feels like they're being heard, and hopefully you feel like you're being heard. Stay calm, don't raise your voice. Find something common that you do both agree on that you can use to start the conversation. So if you're like, hey, we as a group decided to do this, but we have option A or option B. Now we have a common place to start with that will drive our difficult conversation, so that we can come to a place of agreement. So it talks about avoiding exaggeration and things of that nature. So as long as you stay positive and open and flexible, your difficult conversation should hopefully end up on a positive note. And this is chapter 3. Thanks for watching. Bye.